Hello fam, welcome back to the channel. This is Precious Styling. If you're a new subscriber, you're very much welcome to the family, and if you're a returning subscriber, thanks for always stopping by. So in today's video, I'll be showing how I cut and sew this chic asymmetric miniskirt with a train at the side, but with a few moderations according to my client's preference. So before we go on, if you're yet to subscribe to the channel, you may want to hit on the subscribe button so you can stay updated whenever I post new sewing tutorials. And if you haven't given the video a like, please do so as soon as possible. And without delay, let's get started. First things first, we'll start by drafting the back pattern, and because this skirt is asymmetrical, we have to place our pattern paper on fold. This right here is my starting line, which also represents my waistline, and it is from this line that all our vertical measurements will begin from. This right here is my zipper allowance line, and it is from this line that all our subsequent circumferential body measurements will be taken from. Now from the waistline, I went down by 9 inches to mark my hip depth, and that line there represents my hip line, the line at the middle. Now if you're familiar with tutorials on this channel, you'll recall that I usually go up and down by 1 inch from the hip line to create a smooth transition from the waist to the hip. So from the waist to the line there is my client's underbutt region, so I'm just going to indicate that by marking UB for the underbutt. And finally, the bottom of the paper there represents the total length of the skirt. We'll be taking our dart, and that will be determined by our nipple to nipple line. So placing the tape at the zipper allowance line would go in by 4 inches and would mark that there, and from that point we're going to go down by 5 inches and we'll be rolling a line to connect both points. And on both sides of the dart line, I'll be going out by 0.5 inch and I'll be connecting that to the bottom of the dart line. Now to eliminate any resulting zipper bulge, I'll be coming in by 1 inch from the zipper allowance line, and I'm going to mark that there, and from that point I'm going to be connecting that to the first line above the hip line. At this underbutt line, I'm going to be coming in by 0.5 inch from the zipper allowance line because I want the skirt to have a very nice transition towards the skirt's length. I want it to give it fitting. That's just what I'm trying to say. So I'm just going to come in by 0.5 inch, and I'm going to be marking similar 0.5 inch on the skirt's length line. I'll just be using my ruler to connect the point between the underbutt line and the skirt's length. And from what we marked at the underbutt, I'll be connecting it to the 1 inch line below the hip line. Now we'll begin taking all our circumferential body measurements. Now I'm not starting from the initial zipper allowance line, right? I'm starting from the zipper that we gave, okay? So placing my tape at the zipper dart line, I'm going to come in by 8 inches because that represents my waist circumference divided by 4. Now the darts that we took earlier, it's 1 inch in total. We are going to be replacing that dart, okay? So I'm just going to add 1 inch back to the waistline. And finally, I'm going to be adding 2 inches for allowance. To the hip line, I'm just going to be dividing my hip circumference by 4, and I'm going to place that at the zipper allowance line, and I'm going to mark that there, and I'll be adding 2 inches allowance as well. And I'll be marking similar measurements at the bottom line as well. And at the skirt's length line, I'm going to be placing my tape at the point we came in by 0.5 inch, and I'm going to be dividing my hip circumference by 4, and I'm going to be subtracting 1 inch from that measurement, and I'm going to mark that there, and I'll also be adding 2 inches allowance to that, and we'll be connecting all the points we marked. So right now we'll be creating a new zipper allowance line, and we're just going to be coming out by 1.25 inches from the new pattern we've created, okay? We'll just be following the shape of the pattern, and we'll be doing that from top to bottom, and we'll be connecting all the points together. Once that is done, this would be the new zipper allowance. I'll be transferring this dart. I'll be manipulating the dart in order to make the skirt look dartless. Looking at the inspiration, it appears that the skirt is dartless, so we want to create a seemingly dartless skirt. So now I'll be placing a ruler at one leg of the dart line, and I'll be rolling a straight line to the edge of the pattern, and would be connecting the second leg of the dart to the same point where the first line ended. And in this way, we've successfully transferred the dart. Right now, we'll be creating the asymmetry at the waistline. So from the last dart leg, I'll just come out by 2.25 inches, and I'll mark that there. And at the side of the waistline, I will come down by 1.25 inches, and I would also mark that there, and I'll be connecting the point I marked at the side of the waistline to the point I marked just few inches outside the dart leg. And for the base of the skirt, I would also be creating an asymmetry there. So I'm just going to come up from the base of the skirt by 2.5 inches, and I'll mark that there. So at the initial zipper allowance line, I'm going to be marking my bust span measurement divided by 2 or 4 inches. So when I mark that, I'll be adding 2.25 inches to that, and I'll mark that there. And I'll be connecting both points together in a slight curve. I'll be closing up the darts, but first things first, I'll extend the dart lines to the top of the pattern paper, and I'll be slashing open one of the dart legs, and I'll be slashing through the back pattern as well, because whatever effect we want to create at one side, we want it to be effected on the other side. And I'll be placing this pattern I cut out on the other line of the dart, and I'll be sellotaping it down. And I'll be sellotaping the back in similar fashion to give us one piece. After taping it down, you will notice that the symmetry at the hemline has shifted, so I will just be blending that so that everything is equal. Now that is done, at this top here, I'll be continuing the 0.5 inch seam allowance we are giving at the top up to the side of the waistline. And I'll begin cutting the front and back patterns. Just watch carefully how I cut it out. Before I cut out the asymmetry, I'll be opening up the patterns so that the asymmetry doesn't affect the other side of the skirt. So I'll cut out the asymmetry at the waistline and at the base of the skirt. And I'll be cutting out the zipper allowance area as well. Now I'll be folding in the zipper allowance and would be using this back pattern to cut out the front pattern. But before you begin drafting out your front pattern, ensure you cut your fabric and your lining already. Okay, just ensure you cut it out using this pattern, then you can begin modifying this back pattern to create your front pattern. You'd recall that the waist circumference divided by 4 measurements we took at the back actually began from the zipper dart rather than the initial zipper allowance line, and you know that the front doesn't have any zipper allowance, so we are going to begin taking the waist measurement for the front pattern from the initial zipper allowance line, so that we're going to have an equal front and back waist measurement. I would mark that at the waistline, and I'll be adding 2 inches allowance to that. Since we've eliminated the dart, we'll just be adding 2 inches allowance to that, and we'll be connecting that to the line above the hip line, and I'll be cutting this out. So I'll just be cutting out the zipper allowance entirely, and I'll be holding the 2 pieces with a sellotape. Now this is the skirt pattern in full view. Backstage, I extended the hip lines to the other part of the pattern paper, and now I will just begin creating my slashes just the way I want them. However I want the slashes to be, I am going to start rolling a line from point A to point B, just following my preference. Having done this, I'll begin slashing through the lines. And this is what it looks like. I'm going to be placing this pattern on my fabric. I'm using 2 yards of damask, so I just spread it out this way and place the pattern on it. So however you want your pleats to be, how big or how small you want your pleats to be, it would be up to you. So I chose to spread mine this way. Before you start cutting, ensure you pin your pattern so it stays in place. So I'll begin cutting out the pattern on the fabric. One important thing for you to do is that you notch the spaces in between the pattern paper, because if you do not do this, you may find it difficult identifying what part to pleat at the end of the day. So ensure you notch every area that you will need to recall in the future. We would also be indicating the hip line of this pattern on the fabric as well, so that we can use that as a guide when we're making our pleats. I took out the pattern paper, and this is the elongated version of the pattern. Backstage, I used my skirt pattern to cut out the lining, and this is the way I cut out the lining. Now if you look at the lining, you will see that the lining is not up to the length of the skirt. This is because I want the skirt to come in. I want the fabric of the skirt to come in on the lining so that it has a very neat finishing. I would be placing my lining on the fabric, and if you look at the sides, you will see that I notched the hip area of the lining as well. So I'm going to place the base of the lining on the fabric, and I'll take this to the sewing machine and run a stitch across one part to the other. As you can see, I have stitched that part. I will be dragging the top part of the lining towards the top part of the skirt this way, and I'm going to stitch from one point to the other as well. As you can see, I have stitched the top part as well. So we'll start making pleats at this longer side of the skirt, and you see this part that we notched here. I'm going to be dragging it to the second part that we notched at the side of the skirt. So I'm just going to drag that part to the other side, and I'm going to arrange it. I'm going to be making knife pleats, basically all knife pleats facing one direction. So I'm going to pleat it this way, and I'm going to pin it down with the lining piece. After that point that we pinned, we are going to be dragging the subsequent notch to the one below it. Okay, we're just making kind of alternating pleats. You leave the space in between the part where you pinned, and you pick the notch below that part, and then you drag it to the next one. Okay, so we'll just be alternating it. You pin one part, you skip the space in between, you pick the notch below that space, and then you drag it to the subsequent notch. Okay, so this is the way you keep on doing it. So I'm just going to pin that there, and you can see after I pin that, I will be leaving this space now. I'll be leaving this space. I'm not going to be pleating anything on that space. All I will just do is that on the notch after that space, I'm going to be dragging it to the notch following it. Okay, so that's what I'm just going to be doing, and that already falls at the hip area. You can see that that falls at the line we marked at the hip area. That's why I said you should make your notches, so to help you, or make lines or anything to make you recall what you did. So now you can see that that also aligns with the part we notched on the lining, and I'm just going to be dragging both fabric and lining together and pinning everything together. I'll be doing this for the subsequent notches, and we'll be done with this side of the skirt. And this is how the pleats look like on the main fabric. As for this other side, I reckon that during the time we're spreading our pattern on our fabric, some excess fabric actually got into the whole pattern at this side, and it kind of made that place to have some extra fabric. So I'm just going to be making a small pleat at the hip section. Look at the place I notched. That will be where I'm going to be making that tiny pleat, so that this come up of the base of the skirt at this side will tally with the other side. I will just be pinning it from top to bottom, and I'm going to be running a stitch from top to bottom as well. I have stitched both sides, as you can see. However, I left a little opening at the side because I want to use this to turn the fabric to the right side. So I'll just notch the pointy ends of the skirt so that I would have a very sharp clean end, and I'll flip it to the right side. I have flipped the front part of the skirt to the right side, and you can see how it is. Backstage, I gave it a good press, so you're going to define the pleats with the help of your pressing iron. So for the back pattern, you can see that I've already cut out my fabric with the pattern, and I cut a lining in similar shape with the fabric. So at the base, as you can see there, I left a space. Okay, I didn't really allow the lining to come down because I want the fabric to come into the lining by the time we finish sewing it. Okay, so I just left a space there because that fabric there would be coming into the lining. I also notched the zipper allowance area so that I can identify where the zipper is, because this pattern may look similar, so you have to notch so you don't jumble up the whole pieces. So just like we did at the front, we're going to drag the lining now to the base of the skirts pattern, and we're going to align everything, pin both of them together, take it to the sewing machine and stitch it down. I'm also going to do that to the other piece, and we're going to stitch it down as well. I have stitched the base of the skirt, and you can see how that looks like. Now I'll be dragging the lining to the top of the skirt, and I'm going to be pinning that down. So you can see, because we dragged the lining to the top, and because of the fact that we didn't allow the lining to be the same length with the fabric, you can see they come up there. You can see how that part of the skirt came up. So I'll be doing same to the other part, and I'm going to be taking it to the sewing machine to stitch that down. So basically I'll be leaving a small opening, but I'll be stitching all the parts of the skirt like this, and like this. So just leaving only that small opening so we can turn it to the right side. After finishing stitching it, I turned it to the right side and I gave it a good press, and you can see that I've also defined the zipper allowance area. Okay, so now I'm going to be attaching my zipper. So I'll just determine where I want my zipper to stop at. This is a short invisible zipper. I have attached the zipper, and this is what it looks like. I would be joining the front and back piece together, but before I do that, I want to factor in the sash at the side. So I have this long strip of fabric that captures my client's waist to the floor. So I decided to add 7 inches allowance to that, so that this actually looks like a train. So this fabric is about 48.5 inches wide and 20 inches long, as you can see. And this is what I'll be using to create the sash at the side. First of all, I'm going to mark my client's waist measurement. I'm just going to be taking all the circumferential measurements below the waist in order to just shape up the skirt and seal everything up. So I'll start with the waist. I would proceed to the hip and proceed to the skirt's length. And I'll be aligning this strip of fabric to the part of the waist that has the asymmetry, okay, just like the style inspiration. And I'll be placing the sash just about 0.5 inch outside the line of the body measurement we've already mapped out. And so I'll begin making pleats. I'll just try as much as possible to gather this fabric towards the waistline, okay. I'm going to be making several pleats that go upwards towards the waistline. Ensure the pleats you're making have a push-up effect at the waistline so that everything do not just stay flat. You really want the pleat to push out from the waist rather than just droop. And this is the way it looks like after pinning everything. This is the way it's going to fall at the waistline even after we stitch it up. I will be placing the back piece on it, and I'm just going to be following the measurements of the body we took earlier, and I'll take it to the sewing machine and stitch both sides together, and I'll show you how it looks like afterwards. So after stitching it, this is what I have, and you can see that one part of the waist looks kind of loop-sided. Flipping it to the back, this is how it looks like. Do let me know if you want to see a video on how the top was made, and I may just do that. And we've come to the end of this tutorial. Please, if this video was helpful, give it a like, share the video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on future content, and I'll be seeing you in the next one. Bye for now.